Aaron Langworthy and his wife Amanda and their kids are missionary appointees to Uganda through ABWE. That's the same mission agency that the Hartwicks are with. It's the same agency that the Abels were with before they retired. And Aaron's got in contact with me several months ago, and we kind of playing tag back and forth of getting together, and we met for coffee one morning. Really enjoyed Aaron's testimony and his outlook on where they're going in Uganda. So Aaron's coming this morning to share with us from the Word and also talk to us about their ministry they're looking forward to in the country of Uganda.
Well, good morning, guys. It is a privilege anytime you get to step in somebody else's pulpit here. And so I appreciate Nick offering that up this Sunday. As he said, we are the Langworthys. I've got 6 kids. Well, actually 7. I got 1 in heaven. I got 2 that are married, and they live in the Quad Cities as well. And then I've got 4 here. 14, 10, 5, and 1. You saw maybe my little girl walking around. She's the cutest in the family. And most of my kids don't know a stranger, so you might have met a couple of them. This morning we're going to talk about Paul's concern for the church. So kind of as I go through this, I don't want you to think that this is a missions presentation or this is just something that's happening across the world. This is not a new thing that we're going to be talking about. It applies to all of us. If I were to ask you, what does a missionary do, what would you say? You'd probably say something like, they go and tell people about Jesus. They go and share the gospel. What if I asked you, what should a missionary do? Would your answer be any different? This morning, we're going to look at I think the greatest missionary that's been on the planet, the Apostle Paul. And like I said, I want you to put your brain in neutral, thinking this is just something for missionaries. But what we're going to see is how Paul does missions, how he lives his Christian life is going to look like how we should live ours. Help you to know not just what a missionary should be doing and evaluate your missions program, but what should you be doing. So we're going to turn to Romans 15 verse 20. There are going to be some other passages. I'll have those on the screen. But Romans 15:20, Paul says, "And thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. But as it is written, those who have never been told of him will see, and those who have never heard will understand." So we see Paul's primary desire is to get the gospel to places that haven't heard it, right? People who have never heard the good news of Jesus Christ. Paul wants to get there. He wants them to hear about it and ultimately come to know him. In Romans 10:14 through 15, a pretty familiar passage if you've been in church for a while. Paul says, "How will they call on him in whom they've not believed? And how are they to believe in him in whom they've not heard? And how are they to hear unless someone preaches," right? And how are they to preach unless they're sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. And so Paul understands there's a logic behind this, right? There's a logic behind the gospel. The gospel is good news. But it's only good news if it's believed in. And it can only be believed in if it's heard. And it can only be heard if someone opens their mouth and shares it. And Paul understands that no one's going to hear it without someone going, and that requires someone to send, right? And so there's this whole logical progression that Paul puts together here. People can't know Christ unless we open our mouth. We have to share it with them. You guys might have heard the statistics. There's 3 billion people on planet Earth that have little to no access to the gospel. According to the Joshua Project, there's about 7,000 unreached people groups. These are people groups that have less than 2% of the population who would claim to be Christian. Now, we're not making a judgment call of whether they really are Christian. They would just claim to be Christian. So, obviously, the true numbers are usually lower than what the claim number is. So there's 7,000 people groups that are unreached. There's 3,700 languages with part of the Bible translated, and there's another about 1,300 that have no translation work even started. And you can kind of see the breakdown there around the different continents, areas that don't have the word of, that still need the Word of God in their language. That is a huge task, but one that honestly we can take care of. 97% of missionaries are sent to people considered reached by the gospel. Think about that. Like we said, there's 7,000 unreached people groups, but yet 97% of missionaries are going to what would be considered reached people groups, right? Doesn't mean everybody knows Jesus there, but at least 2% do. There is a church there. The other 3% go to unreached people group. Only 1% of the average church's missions budget goes to support that 3%. So for to kind of like visually give you an idea of what that looks like, right? 97 missionaries, they're all in black there, are going to reached people, but only 3% are going to the unreached area. For a church, on the average church, for every $100 a church receives, 3 cents goes to a missionary to an unreached people group. There are 550 evangelical churches for every 1 unreached people group. So when I say that, like, those numbers looked really bad, there's a lot of people that haven't heard the gospel, a lot of unreached people groups. The truth is, there's over 500 churches that exist for every 1 of those unreached people groups. So the ability to do it is definitely there, right? If 500 churches band together and they could send a team of missionaries, right? Or as you see, that's approximately 57,000 Christians for every 1 unreached people group. Do you know what country has the most missionaries going to it? I know you don't normally probably talk a lot Sunday morning, but you can give a guess here. Any guess? What do you think? What country do you think has the most missionaries going to it? Africa? Nope, none of the countries in Africa are on the number 1 country. It'll be the last one you would imagine. United States. United States has the most missionaries going to it. Not definitely a country that you would think needs the most missionaries going to it, right? We have multiple Bible translations. We have multiple Bible helps. We have Christian radio. We have the internet with tons of resources. We have book after book after book written. We have churches kind of all over. Compared to the rest of the world, we're pretty rich and deep in the Christian influence. Now, obviously, I understand, like, America's has been moving away from that, but we're still very wealthy in regards to access to the gospel. But yet, we have the most missionaries going to this country. If every Christian just gave $2 a month to frontier mission work, we could send over 72,000 missionaries to the 7,200 unreached people groups. So that's 10 teams. If every Christian was like $2, that we could accomplish, right, the mission and getting the gospel to people who have never heard it. So what about you? Do you need to make it your ambition to share the gospel with others? In an increasingly post-Christian world, you may not be around unreached people groups, but you are around unreached people, right? You guys like live here in the Quad Cities. It wasn't too long ago that Barna did a study that this area was in the top, I think, 15 cities, like this area, of post-Christian cities in the U.S., which shocked me, right? You would think, well, that's California, that's New York, that's, Portland or something like. You would kind of think those areas. But we were, I think, number 15 on that list of most post-Christian cities. So you rub shoulders with unbelievers, unless you live like a hermit in your house and you don't ever get out. If you go grocery shopping, if you go to the bank, if you live in a neighborhood, you're going to bump into unbelievers. And so you have unreached people around you. They don't understand the consequence of sin, the significance of Jesus, his birth and his death and his resurrection, and the requirement of faith that despises sin and loves God. So who can you share the good news with? You guys ever heard the phrase, if you don't evangelize as a church, you will fossilize? Like, you will die. This church will not exist one day if believers in this community don't share the word of God. Like, they're just not going to come to Christ and come worship with you if they don't know him. So we have to go and tell them. We don't have to save them. We just have to tell them. And I know it can be scary and awkward. Can we just be honest? Like, most of us probably like, that might be kind of a scary or awkward conversation to have with someone, right? What if I don't have all the answers or something like that? That's going to be really confrontational, because they're going to understand that, like, I'm telling them essentially they're going to go to hell if they don't know Jesus. Like, God's just. He punishes sin. He punishes sinners. And like we talked about in Sunday school this morning, that punishment either falls on Jesus Christ or we take it in hell. And so that might be awkward and scary. But we have to do it. We have to understand that, like, their life depends on it, on us getting over that. We have to make it our ambition to talk about who Jesus is and what he did. Make it your ambition this year to have at least one person that you're going to share a clear gospel presentation with, right? You're going to tell them, listen, like, you and I are bad. We sin. We do wrong things. And God is a just God. And he has to punish because of his justice. But there is a way of escape. God has sent his son to pay that price on the cross, right? He's taken the punishment on himself so that he could give you mercy, so that he could save you. And he rose again, right? Have that conversation. So just a couple things as we kind of go through here. Some things to think about. Who do you still need to share the gospel with that you haven't? Likely, a name is in your mind of someone that you should have shared, but you haven't. Make it your goal. How will you play a part in getting the gospel to those around the world who have no Christians near them to share the good news, right? Because we have two obligations. We have to share with the people that we're in contact with, and we have to make sure that people who don't have Christians around them, right, the unreached people, that someone is sent to go and share the gospel with them. So how are you involved in both of those things? But your responsibility doesn't end, right, with rubbing shoulders with people. You can't count on that it's just going to be purely this church even, right, that's going to get the gospel out. It's working with, it's sending. I know you guys, we were talking about this morning, like, you guys are part of the General Association of Regular Baptists. Like, it's working together, understanding, like, Christ and his church globally are to be about this work of getting the good news to people who have never heard it. What does this look like? This mission to reach to see the gospel reach the unreached look like to us? Well, that is our future home. We're hoping to be there in like October, November. You can see the circle that says home. That's right on the border of South Sudan and Uganda. It's about a mile from the border. And those three circles are three kind of people groups that we're hoping to reach. The Iringa, those are the last unreached peoples in the country of Uganda. They're overwhelmingly Muslim, and they are currently very open to hearing the gospel. Though there is some militant influence that is recently been coming in, they, as Muslims, they are supposed to care about Jesus, and they're supposed to know the Bible, but many don't. And so they're pretty open to talking about Jesus and God and the Bible. And so we have open doors there. And we have seen the church there grow. Then we have the Bidi refugee camp. This is the second largest refugee camp in the world, which is surprising, right? Uganda is not a wealthy country. To think that it's supporting tons of refugees from Sudan, South Sudan, and Congo are where many of these refugees come. So this camp specifically, or settlement, it's a city really at 250,000 people. That's, to blow your mind, that's bigger than Des Moines. Des Moines has 215,000 people. 40,000 of the people there were children who came across the border unaccompanied by a relative. So that's like the size of Moline. You can imagine, like an entire city, the entire city of Moline with nothing but children is pretty incredible. Children with no, not just children, but children with no guardians, no legal guardians, no mom or dad or grandma and grandpa. There's tons of other kids as well, besides those 40,000. So 250,000 people. What's really cool is God has used war and famine in Sudan and South Sudan to drive these people down into Uganda for safety. In Sudan especially, which is like eighth, according to Stratus, it's the most dangerous, one of the eighth most dangerous country to be a Christian in. And so the gospel is going very slowly as far as reaching people there. It's very hard to get people to hear it because you can't openly proclaim it. Churches are underground, meeting in houses. And so that slows the progress down. And of course, war doesn't make anything any easier when it comes to getting people to hear the gospel. But what's cool is you have 250,000 people that are down in Uganda where we do have the freedom to share the gospel. And churches have been planted. And so these Sudanese tribes, in fact, most of Sudan qualifies as just filled with unreached people groups. And so a lot of these people are down there being able to be reached with the gospel. And then the Mahdi people. This is in the mountains, the Metu Mountains. And these people are geographically isolated. They don't, for the most part, they're illiterate. They don't have a Bible in their language that they can read. It's a tonal language. The Iringa people, I should say, that they have part of the Bible in their language, and that translation work is still going on. In fact, Reaching Africa's Unreached, the kind of the group that's there on that border, they've been working to help get that complete. We would love to see that scripture done and in their language by the time that we're dead or retired, whatever comes first. So the Mahdi people need that as well. They need a Bible in their language, and then they need some literacy training so that they can hear the Word of God in their own language. Can you imagine, like, having everything you know about God purely being secondhand, like not being able to read and know what the Bible really says, and just being totally dependent on a pastor to tell you, and then hoping that pastor actually knows what he's talking about, right? Well, because that's a problem, there is a lot of false doctrine in those areas because no one knows what's really true, right? They're going off of what somebody says. So those are like the three big groups that we are going to reach, right? To see the gospel go to new ears, to reach new hearts. Uganda is the fifth largest host of refugees worldwide, and that's pretty amazing. Their average age there is 16, so it's the second youngest country in the world as far as by age. So there's a great opportunity if we can get this generation, right, then we don't have to worry about evangelizing way more people in the next generation, right? Because like moms and dads will do that in homes and they'll disciple their children. So we have a great opportunity to sort of get ahead of the curve. The average family's got 6 kids, so we'll be just normal over there. We won't be a big family. And for us, this is a big deal. It's a tough place where we're going. This is in areas, especially in the Metu Mountains, people don't have clean drinking water. People live in like mud huts. This is an area that people will, they have subsistence farming, so they farm, they hunt, that's how they eat. So if the rains don't come, they struggle. They don't have, especially in the Metu Mountains, there's no schooling. It's a tough area. There is persecution. There were missionaries that were martyred in Iringa in 2002. There's some other missionaries that were shot, but thankfully not killed. There was a pastor just a couple months ago that was tortured and killed in the Metu Mountains. It's difficult. People are suffering, which we care about. We should care not just about getting the gospel out to people, but we should care about them as people, right? And so for us, this is doing things like taking care of physical needs, right? So are we just making that up, or did Paul care about that? Well, in Romans 15, we'll go back, Romans 15, 22 through 26, Paul says, "This is the reason why I have so often been hindered from coming to you." He's talking to the Romans, right? "But now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions, and since I have longed for many years to come to you, I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain." Spain is where he's hoping to share the gospel with people who have never heard it, "and to be helped on my journey there by you, once I have enjoyed your company for a while. But at present, however, I'm going to Jerusalem, bringing aid to the saints. For Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make some contribution for the poor among the saints at Jerusalem." So as much as Paul wanted to visit Rome and to be helped along his way to Spain, there was a more pressing need, right? Physical needs. He had been collecting these gifts in churches along his journeys to bring them back because things were physically tough for the Jews in Jerusalem. This shouldn't surprise us. In Galatians 2, 9 through 10, Paul says, "When James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave the right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and me, that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. Only they asked us to remember the poor." And what does Paul say? Well, that was the very thing I was eager to do, right? So let's not like, sometimes missions can be very social gospel. Let's go drill wells. Let's go feed people. Let's go take care of orphans. Those things are great. Let's not fall into one or two ditches. We just do the gospel. We just share the gospel, and we don't worry about any of that stuff. Or the ditch of we just take care of people's physical needs. But that's not biblical. Biblical is I care about both. I care about all suffering, especially eternal suffering, right? And so I want to take care of those things as much as I can. Throughout the Old and New Testament, God has commanded us to take care of those who are in need, right? Truly in need, right? Not people who just don't want to work, right? People who are really in need. 2 Corinthians 1 through 8 tells us, "We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking a part in the relief of the saints." This is what Paul's talking about. He's talking about these people over here, they're even though they're in affliction, even though they're in a poverty, they begged us to take part in this offering for the relief of the saints back in Israel. And this not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. Accordingly, we urge Titus, as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love also is genuine. And that last bit there is really important, because you got to realize there was this Jew and Gentile natural divide, right? Culturally, they're different, right? Just like you are culturally different than people in Uganda or people in France or Germany or China, right? You're culturally different. And this was very true of them. Their cultural practices would have been very, very different. But Paul says, like, I want you guys here, you Corinthians, to pay attention to this example I've given you and also be a part of bringing together funds to help brothers and sisters in a different culture in their time of need, because that proves the earnestness of your love. Think about it. Like, it proves that Christianity is not national, it's not racial, it's not based on gender, it's not based on any of that stuff. It's right? It's based on the fact that we have the same Father. And so when we give and we care and we show concern for people that are different than us on a worldly level, it proves that really we share something greater in common. It shows this to the world. And of course, this isn't a have to give, but that we want to give. This is what Paul wants, right? Think about family members or close friends. You don't give to them in a time of need because you have to. You give and show concern because you want to, right? Like, it proves that you love them. We all understand, like, giving gifts because you have to. Like, oh, they gave me a Christmas gift, I got to give them one. Oh, they invited me to the graduation ceremony. You guys recently probably had some graduation parties or something that you were invited to. Well, that means I got to give a graduation gift because I've been invited, or a wedding, right? We understand, like, the have to feeling of giving, but you also understand I can't wait. Like, I can't wait till they open this. I'm going to have so much joy seeing their joy, their excitement. Is going to give me such joy. That's what God wants. He wants that for you. He wants you to help others in a way that brings you joy. Now, obviously, your neighbors are not going to be in the same dire situation that people in northern Uganda are, but you have people that are in difficult, personally dire situations, right? Are in places where they need your help. They're not in a tough spot because they have just been foolish and things like that, but things have happened to them, right? They may have lost their job. They may be going through a difficult medical type situation. So keep your eyes open for physical needs that you can help. Like, fulfill this command to take care of those who are in need. For us, and for you guys, right? So just think about, questions to think about. In what way will you help others, especially believers in need? And what can you do to help believers in faraway lands? Right? You see the parallel again? What can you do here, and what can you do somewhere else? Right? So share the gospel here, get the gospel somewhere else. Take care of needs here, help take care of needs somewhere else. Both of those things are important. So for us, what does it look like? We do things like helping to drill wells and help them do better agriculturally, take care of pregnant moms. We give out, like, mama kits, get dental and medical treatments to people who would otherwise not have them. But Paul has actually one last major concern, and that's that the church would be mature. Now, that might sound shocking because you think of, well, Paul's he's missions. He cares, his goal is to get the gospel to people who have never heard it. That's true. But look back in Romans 15:14. So before where we started, in verse 14, Paul says, I myself am satisfied about you, my brothers, that you yourselves are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, and able to instruct others. So think about that. What is Paul saying about the Roman church? They're in good shape, right? They're healthy, mature. I don't need to spend time with you to take care of you. You guys are doing it. And at the beginning of the book, in Romans 1:8, Paul says, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you because your faith has been proclaimed in all the world. So why is Paul stopping by Rome? Well, he says for mutual edification, but it's a stop along his way to Spain. But he doesn't have to stay there and take care of a bunch of problems and share the gospel with a bunch of people that don't know it. Like the church there has been birthed and is growing and is sharing with their neighbors. In fact, Paul says your faith has made it around the world. Like people all over the place are hearing about what you guys are doing, what you believe, the change that Christ has made in your life. In 2 Corinthians 10, 13 through 16, Paul says, but we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence God assigned to us, to reach even to you. For we are not overextending ourselves as though we did not reach you, for we were the first to come all the way to you with the gospel of Christ. We do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others, but our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged. So you guys hear that? Our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged so that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you without boasting of work already done in another's area of influence. So Paul says, we want to preach the gospel in lands beyond you, right? But there's something that's kind of contingent there, something that's going to slow us down. Before we can do that, we need to see that your faith has increased. Like we need to know that the church is mature before we can do that. So Paul's method of ministry is not convert and desert. He doesn't go and like share the gospel. Some people get saved, and then he's like, all right, cool. You guys, good luck with that. Keep growing. I'm on to somebody else, and God's got you. That's not Paul's method at all. In fact, in his missionary journeys, if you look, he stops by places he went before. And every time he like starts with a smaller, and then a second journey, he's going to go a little bit further out, and his third missionary is going to go further out, right? That's his normal pattern of ministry is I'm going to check up on you. I'm going to make sure you're mature. Think about it. What's most of the New Testament? It's Paul's letters to churches, right? Paul cares about the maturity of the church. He doesn't want to just simply make converts. He wants to make disciples. He wants to make people who are then doing the things that he's doing, right? Sharing and teaching. Like that's the Great Commission, right? Make disciples and teach them everything, right? Make them, baptize them, teach them. Like keep doing that. Not just get people saved and then that's it. That's not fulfilling the Great Commission. That's not doing what God's commanded us to do. We have to disciple. The reason this is important for Paul is if that isn't done, there's a few things that are going to come out of that. One, those converts and the church will either potentially die because no one's making new converts because they haven't been discipled. So they don't know, maybe I don't even know that was my job. I thought that's what the pastor does, right? Two, bad doctrine creeps in. And we see this, like a lot of the books of the New Testament, Paul's trying to take care of bad doctrine that creeps in. That's what's being dealt with in a lot of ways in Africa. There are churches all over sub-Saharan Africa, but they are infected with the prosperity gospel. Jesus is simply a means to get wealthy and rich, or to not die, or not have my wife die in childbirth, or to get my crops to grow like I should. And so he's like a good luck charm. He's just a way to get what they want. And so the gospel really isn't the gospel. And syncretism, which is where you blend other religions, is prevalent. And so people are just like adding Jesus to other things like ancestor worship or praying to spirits. And so you really don't have a church or a very healthy church in Africa. Because historically, unfortunately, missionaries have sort of done this where they've converted people, maybe, to some degree, and then they've gone. And so there hasn't been pastors that have been trained up, and pastors have been trained to train up the next pastor, right? We can be guilty of this here in America. Most of you probably think, well, if one day we need a new pastor, Nick's gone, we'll just hire another one. And if we need a new Sunday school teacher, there'll just be somebody here that'll do it, right? And there's never a thought often in the American church that, like, our job is to disciple. Like, we should be thinking about who here could I train up to be a Sunday school teacher? Who could I train up to be the next pastor? Who could I train up to be the next deacon? Who could I train up to do children's ministry? Who could I do that with, right? How can I invest in the church here? Because all of us are somewhere along the lines in our growth. And so we should be like teaching someone and learning from someone. That's super important. Otherwise, we're not going to grow, and we're not going to really be obedient to the Great Commission. So it's really important to be thinking about, like, how can I do these things? That's what we're doing in Uganda. So we're going there to primarily train pastors, because their knowledge level is so low. You'd be shocked probably how much you know more than many of the pastors there. And they're leading people, like entire churches, right? So we want to make sure they know the Bible well. We want to disciple them so that they can disciple people in their church, so that moms and dads can disciple their children, so that one day those children grow up and disciple their children, and more pastors are trained, and churches are planted, and things grow. So that's what we're doing there. And then on top of that, we're doing evangelism, right, with the unreached people. We want to see long-term growth. That's how it happens. It happens through discipleship, training, so that we're teaching others who will teach others, right? And so that's how we multiply. It's really important that we're engaged in this. So questions for you as we kind of wrap up is, what do you need to do to disciple? Like, how are you going to get involved in this? It's not like optional. We're commanded to do it, right? We have to disciple. If you're like, I don't know if I can do that, I don't know if I know enough, well, that means you probably should get discipled by someone. And you probably know more than somebody else if you know Jesus Christ. And so you should be discipling. What is your plan to grow in holiness? And what part will you play in helping your family here grow? It is not on Pastor Nick to grow this church. That's not just his responsibility. You guys understand that? He didn't pay me to say that. It's not his responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. We all have a part to play. You are the body, and God has gifted you, and you're to use those gifts to build up the body, to edify the church. That's a responsibility every believer has. So that's my challenge I want to leave with you guys this morning. We don't have time. I got a video, but we're not going to play it. I got to meet with a pastor who is a Sudanese refugee, and I asked him I said, what can you tell the people back here in the States? How can they pray for you? And so I recorded him kind of talking, and it was so interesting. I did that, and then after that, I written this sermon, and it struck me as I'm listening to the prayer requests that he had. They were these three things. He didn't know that. He was not thinking about Romans 15, but he was praying that the gospel would get to people who had never heard it. He was praying for training to happen for pastors that needed it, and he's praying for physical needs because he knew his people, especially back in Sudan, were struggling. But people living in these refugee camps are struggling. And so he's asking for prayer for these three things. So I'm going to ask you guys to be thinking about that, to pray for these three things. Pray that you would get the gospel out, that you would help build a mature church, that you would take care of physical needs, and pray that God would send others to go do that around the world, right? Pray that he would send forth laborers into the harvest. That's my challenge for you this morning. I'm going to pray, and then I think Pastor Nick will come up and we'll sing another song. God, I thank you that you are at work here and in places around the world that we've never heard of. Among people this side of heaven will never meet. I thank you that you are that great of a God, moving us to obey you and stir in us a thanksgiving for what you do and what you will do. We thank you that you are merciful and gracious, and you care about everyone, people around the world. You want them to know you and to worship you and to give you glory. Let us move out of grace and not guilt this morning. Let our obedience be motivated by thankfulness in the gift that you have gave us, that gift of you, to know you. Thank you for your church. Thank you for the church here, that you've planted it to be a light in the Clare. Help the people here to do that. And may you be glorified in this body. We pray all this